Well, the Minnesota Vikings defeated the Green Bay Packers 24-10 in Week 8, but that was not nearly the biggest storyline of the game. Here to talk about that and more with me is Luke Braun, the host of Locked On Vikings. And Luke, we'll get to the game a little bit, but obviously the big story is Kirk Cousins tearing his Achilles. The replay comes out. Everybody knows immediately what it is based off of previous injuries that we've seen across the league so far this year. But it puts a damper on this win and honestly puts a damper on the Minnesota season. Where does Minnesota go from here with Cousins being out for the year and potentially with his long-term future now in doubt in Minnesota and maybe across the league with what comes next for him?
There's so many conflicted, weird thoughts, at least going through my head. And it's happened about an hour and a half ago, real time, as we recorded this. So I'm still kind of processing, but here's the thought, I guess. The conflicting thoughts are like, look, Kirk's out, season's over, right? Assuming it is the Achilles that the Vikings fear and that it sure as heck looked like, that's the season. We're not going to go win the Super Bowl with Nick Mullins, but or maybe, I don't know, weirder stuff's happened. Nick Foles won one, right? So there's part of it's that. And then you look at it, well, they're on a 3-game winning streak. Jordan Addison is breaking out. Justin Jefferson's coming back soon. Well, maybe they do just want to get a little bit of a point guard and that's all Kirk Cousins ever said he was, right? So what if we call Tennessee and say, hey, Will Levis had a great game. What do you want to do about Tannehill? Maybe we call Arizona, see what happens there and try to salvage this. And then there's also this world where they say, actually, now, you know what? The season has been weird. We were a little unlucky. Now Kirk's gone. He's they'll revisit the contract with him still. They still will probably have that conversation. But maybe we go, you know what? Screw it. Who wants Danielle Hunter? Who wants Ezra Cleveland? Who wants all these other guys? There are certain pieces that are going to be part of the next chapter, right? Like you're not going to trade away Justin Jefferson. He's the guy you're building around, right? And there are young players that are the core of the Vikings. And I think Addison is starting to become one of those guys. Christian Darrisaw is one of those guys. So there's all these different directions they can go. The next 48 hours will be fascinating. By Wednesday, we'll know where the team is at. And if they feel like, trying to make something of this, like the Jets are doing, just say, hey, let's go with Zach Wilson. Maybe they do just let Jaren Hall take the reins and then Nick Mullins comes off IR. He'll be the backup once that happened. Maybe they do that too. There's so many different ways.
And I want to get your opinion on what they should do. Let's say you are the decision maker. Obviously, you're still processing everything that happened, but assuming Kirk's out for the year, which obviously seems very likely at this point, are you buying a quarterback at the deadline? Are you selling those pieces as you talked about and just looking forward to next season? What would Luke Braun do in that situation?
It's hard for me to call a season quits ever, right? Until you're mathematically eliminated. It's really, really hard for me to say, we'll pack it in, we're done. We'll fire sale. Especially because, if I were in charge, Danielle Hunter would be on a 5-year deal right now instead of this 1-year crap, and he would have signed it 3 years ago. So I want him to retire a Viking, right? I think he's always going to be worth that. So I think if I were in charge, there's certain people that I would think, okay, who's part of the future in this organization? It's not nobody, right? We're not trading away Justin Jefferson. He's part of our future as much as he's part of our present. It's just TJ Hawkinson, all of those guys. So what I would maybe do is I'd start calling around, see where the value is, right? If somebody's willing to give me somebody reasonable for a mid-round pick, something that doesn't break the bank. What I don't want to do is jeopardize my ability to get QB of the future for QB of the now, right? The most important thing Kwesi is going to do in his tenure as GM, true of any GM, is get the quarterback of the future. Who's it going to be? Are you drafting someone? Are you trading for, the farm for Kyler Murray? Who's your guy? Cousins is the guy he inherited. Are you buying into him? Is he your guy too? Whatever they do, don't trade 2 first-round picks for Ryan Tannehill and then go, well, now we can't draft a quarterback, right? Don't do that. If that's the price for somebody like Tannehill, then say thanks, but no thanks, Tennessee. But if you can get him for a third or a second and a third or something like that, that doesn't really, you can still trade a whole bunch of first-round picks and move up in the first round and do what you want to do there, but still be reasonable there. I think that's the outcome that feels the best to me, at least instant reaction. But I'm curious to see what the Vikings plan is. And if I can then kind of reverse engineer from there and say, okay, all right, that's what they're thinking.
Right. And to me, it's not only the Vikings side of this, but the Kirk Cousins side of it too, where this was a quarterback playing for another contract, whether it be in Minnesota or somewhere else. And there are so many different viewpoints you can take it from his perspective.
Right.
And some of it is, well, where is his value now? Is this future in Minnesota? For you, Luke, where were you before this injury with Kirk? And then where are you now? And what would it kind of take for you to have him back in Minnesota? And what do you think his value is going to be league-wide?
Yeah, my thing going into the year was this is the year where he proves it. Because it seemed to me like the Vikings had an opportunity to extend him after the season last year. They had lengthy extension talks in camp and didn't get something done. Now he's slated to be a free agent, and they said, we're going to revisit this in February and March, which to me screams, prove it, Kirk. Go prove it, and then we'll see if you can change the texture of this conversation with your play in 2023, then we'll change our minds. Otherwise, we're not going to give you what you had. And the reporting at the time was that Cousins had actually given the Vikings an offer and said, I'll sign this contract. What do you guys think of it? And it was pretty reasonable. It was less than Daniel Jones is making right now. And they said no to that. So to me, that means the Vikings are ready to move on unless Kirk Cousins actively plays so well you just cannot justify letting him go. And I'm talking they go to the Super Bowl, that kind of thing. Well, if that's going to be impossible now, my guess is that he goes into free agency and we see the market. And I don't think the door closes, right? But maybe he goes into free agency. He doesn't get the market he thinks. It's a lot harder coming off an Achilles when you're in your late 30s, right? We'll see where that goes. And then maybe, you call him back and say, hey, the context has changed here. You want to revisit this conversation? I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to go about it. But my guess is that the Vikings are going to move their eyes forward. And it's the next guy. Whether that guy, who knows, maybe Jaron Hall has a breakout 3 games, and oh my God, where did we find this guy, right? Certainly stranger things have happened looking at you, San Francisco. So maybe there's something like that, or maybe they bring in somebody that, okay, now this is the Vikings guy. We'll kind of just have to wait and see. There's so many different angles that can happen. It's like impossible to really predict anything right now.